Hello, everybody. Welcome to this Thrive Tribe video interview. I'm delighted to welcome Matteo Galatis from the Fresh Perspective. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Paul, and everyone. Thank you for joining.
So, welcome to this Thrive Tribe video. Matteo is going to share some really interesting perspectives with us today. One of the things we're going to talk about is money, a subject I know interests me greatly, and I'm sure many other people. And we're going to talk about some of the interesting energy and dynamics around money. Matteo has a particular expertise in this. And this is a Thrive Tribe video. So as you know by now, with all these videos, we're aiming to provide tips and advice and guidance and a bit of coaching to people on how to thrive, how to be more successful in life, on whatever terms that means to you. And hopefully we're going to have a great time doing that today. So, Matteo, perhaps I could start by asking you, you actually trained, I believe, as an accountant, and now you're doing something very different. Could you tell us a little bit about your journey and how you got from there to here?
It's a very interesting one. Thanks for asking, Paul. I started off, one of my strengths in school was business and accounting. And I did one of those aptitude tests, as we all do, which I don't quite believe in, but I did have a strength and a skill in working with accounting. So I decided, okay, let's go do accounting as opposed to philosophy. It's more relevant in this day and age to earn an income, earn a good income, have a good lifestyle. And of course, my parents were supportive of me having some kind of a security rather than just doing random stuff they wouldn't earn good money. So I trained up as a chartered accountant, and I worked for some big organizations in South Africa. And along the way, I found I was actually, while I was a student, I used to work as a waiter, and I had so much energy, I had so much passion, I used to enjoy interacting with people. And then the moment I started working as an auditor, I found I used to have energy dips. I used to become lazy, and I was wondering, what is this all about? It's not me all the time, but somehow in that environment, standing in front of a computer screen, I'd have these energy dips and not real motivation, which was quite intriguing to me. So I started looking for other things. I actually wanted to go back to being a waiter because it was more fulfilling and I felt better within myself. So I knew I needed to find a balance in that. So there was a career that was good and fulfilling, and there was this something else inside of me that needed something more. So around that time, when I finished to be the training part of becoming an accountant, I started looking for other things. I wanted other businesses. I wanted to get involved in business because I have a particular aptitude or a knack of, I want to be more hands-on than just sit in the background. And that led me to a whole path of personal development, learning about how the mind works, learning different healing techniques, which was part of my own healing, because along the way I discovered it's not just about me having knowledge, because I was always in search of truth. What is the truth in this world? What is the right way to live? Because we're all observing other people and seeing how other people are living, but what's actually true, what's right? And I found that actually nobody really knows what they're doing. They're just copying the people that came before them and trying to do something that seems right. It's a bit of a tongue-in-cheek. Some people do know what they're doing, but we can follow certain principles. That's what I've discovered. So I followed a path in learning certain disciplines, learning how to heal deep aspects of ourselves that we carry from the past. I learned certain therapeutic techniques, and then eventually I found myself into the world of coaching, and I trained up as a professional coach. Then I became a trainer, and I trained coaches, and eventually I trained trainers how to train coaches. So I evolved myself quite well, and that's where I found my ability to thrive. I actually, when I stood on the stage training people or training trainers or doing transformation work, that's when I found myself at my best. That's when I performed at my best. So in a very short nutshell, that's a little bit of the journey that I took, and eventually became a professional coach. But I wanted to focus in the areas of money and created a training to support people to, number one, shift their relationship with money, and number two, understand how money works and actually learn to work with money practically. Because there's a lot of people in the world that don't know the practical tools to work with money.
Yes.
I mean, I was an accountant. Okay, I knew some things about money, but I didn't learn everything to do with money in accounting. And there's some people who are the artists and right brain kind of thinkers and more creatives, and they haven't learned how to manage money.
Yeah.
So yeah, this kind of inspired a whole journey of working with money.
It's fascinating. We certainly see loads of examples of the rich and famous, particularly the famous. I'm thinking about showbiz people and rock stars and people. You regularly see these stories about how did they end up broke? How did they end up with nothing? And sometimes very young bands and so on get fleeced by signing the wrong deals, don't they? Because they don't understand royalties and all the rest of it. So, money can sound a bit of a dry subject, but if you think about it in terms of someone's life path as a rock musician or as a showbiz entertainer, and potentially the pleasure and joy they give to millions and end up with nothing financially, kind of feels wrong, doesn't it? There's something wrong there somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it doesn't mean because you have money, you're fulfilled. That's one thing I've learned, and I learned the hard way, because I also pursued the path of money, like trying to make money, and it didn't quite work. So there's a lot of elements we need to put into place.
Absolutely. And can I just go back on one thing before we get more into the money subject, which I think is absolutely fascinating from all sorts of points of view. Before we do that, can I just go back to one thing you were talking about there? You were talking about the moment when you realised you were thriving and you spotted that you were being your best. I think you were saying in relation to being on stage or being in a training situation or whatever. Can you describe a little bit more of for you personally, how you knew? What was it that was telling you that you were thriving and you hit the sweet spot, as it were?
Yeah, it's actually a difficult question to answer. The reason is because I didn't know what it was until I found it. Where I remember myself when I was studying at school, and I used to study for tests and exams. I remember that my way of studying was standing up and teaching in front of an imaginary class.
Yeah.
So I had kind of a natural teacher inside of me. And when I was in the audit environment, I was just in front of a computer. So I started to compare what worked and what didn't work. And I just started to put the little pieces of the puzzle together of my life, of what works, what is it that increases my energy, what is it that increases my level of happiness, my level of fulfillment, and what is it that decreases it. And I just knew that sitting in front of the computer doing kind of mindless tasks or not fulfilling my highest potential, that lowered my energy. And doing the things that I found a natural ability to do, a natural affinity to, those things increased my energy. So I can't say there was a point of discovery that said, okay, this is it. What I found is there was a consistent messages along the way that I needed to be on stage. One of the things I'm really good at is standing in front of an audience and speaking. And I discovered that. I was actually on my 21st birthday, I couldn't do a speech. I was too shy. I didn't have the capabilities. And so the journey for me was a part of letting go of the aspects and beliefs about myself that put me in a box. The accountant in a grey suit that sat in a cubicle behind the desk. That wasn't me. It wasn't a full picture of who I am, although that's who I thought I was. And as a result of me perceiving myself through this incorrect picture, I was living a life that wasn't totally me, that wasn't the full aspect of who I can be. So part of the journey was letting go of that part that I thought I was, to start to embrace that part that was more me and more authentically and truthfully me, which was the trainer, etc. And there was a long journey. So when I started becoming a trainer and learning coaching skills, that was part of the shedding process and the stepping into the new persona of who I who I was best at, so to speak.
Yeah, it's kind of evolution, as you said, isn't it, of becoming more of who we really are. I always think of it as a little bit like we have layers, we have layers that we hide under, and you have to kind of peel them away to get back to who am I really in my essence.
Yeah.
And I absolutely resonate with what you were saying about being quite surprised sometimes at discovering who you really are. I had a very similar experience to you, actually, when I was very young at middle school in England. I once wrote a poem, was asked to read it out in front of the school. I was almost physically sick. I mean, I really didn't want to get on that stage. And here I am, sort of 40 years later, the biggest show off in the world. I love to get on stage, do presentations, speeches and things. So it's really interesting that you evolve and you discover who you really are. And it's sometimes surprising to us as individuals,
Yeah.
The thing you mentioned that really struck me as important to emphasize for tripod members is the indication you seem to pick up on there was the energy, the way it made you feel when you were doing it. Because I always point out to people that try to capture those moments in a journal or however, try to capture these clues. I see these as clues, Matteo, as to who we are really. When we suddenly feel either really energized, really excited, really inspired, or maybe really outraged, or really dismayed, or really offended, those are clues as to who we are really. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I learned a few years ago that life gives us both support and challenge in order to become true to who we are. So if we're being challenged at the moment, if people are pushing our buttons or the world's pushing our buttons, it's molding us to become more true to who we actually want to be rather than who we think we want to be.
Yeah.
And at the same time, we're getting support through life, through people, through places, through events, through circumstances to grow into who we are. There's always a balance of both. We don't, some people want to have one side only support, but I've learned that the best and most optimal way is to embrace both support and challenge. And you see the people who become masters of their lives, who built great businesses. They've learned to embrace obstacles and predict when obstacles are going to happen and plan for them so that when they come, they act in accordance with an equilibrated mind rather than in reaction. And this is something really important to do with the lower parts of our brain, the older parts of our brain, because we tend to react when we're surprised. So it's important to plan so that we don't get surprised. So, yeah, I think I went off on a bit of a tangent there.
It's very interesting. It's always interesting to hear people's personal journeys, because these are all clues for us, I think, to pick up on. It'd be nice if we could go through life and just learn from everybody else's mistakes, so we don't need to make any. But I think it's not like that. I think it's important actually that people embrace the value of making mistakes, because those are the real learning moments to me.
Absolutely, and also not to see them as mistakes, to see it in our perceptions as learning opportunities, as something that needed to happen for me to grow. Yeah. I'll share an example. I was delivering a training in Russia, in Moscow, and some guy was in the background who was consistently saying, "Well, why? How does it work? Why?" I was sharing principles. And he was saying, "Yes, but why? I'm not getting it." He was really frustrated. So I said, "Fine, let's look at it right now. What's the issue?" And it was the second day, and he said, "Well, when he was younger, part of his parents used to never acknowledge and appreciate when he used to bring home trophies, he used to bring home certificates, he used to get 90%, 95%. And they say, well, what about 99? What about 100? Why can't you do more? What about this?" And he eventually, when he got to around 9, 10 years old, he gave up, or 12, I don't remember the exact age, but he gave up. He said, I'm not going to bring home trophies anymore. It's not worth it. I'm not getting the acknowledgement that I want. So he stopped performing, and then eventually got into drugs, and got into a bad crowd. But then eventually found himself and got involved in business. But I asked him a few important questions, and one of them was, what skill did you develop as a result of those? We're talking about mistakes of your parents, because we think, well, they're supposed to appreciate us. But that his parents not giving him applause actually helped him develop one of the most critical skills that he needed. And I said, what skill have you got now as a result of that? Well, I learned to market myself. I learned to sell, because that's what he was doing to his parents. He was, selling more and more, trying to prove that he was worthy. So he learned the skill of selling. He says he can sell ice to an Eskimo. And I said, well, now can you see that? I said, would you trade that skill in for anything? If I paid you an amount of money, would you trade? He says, no way, that's what I need. I said, great, because you need that skill in order to thrive in your life.
Yes.
And I went back to his parents and I said, well, if they didn't pressure you as much as they did, would you have had that skill? He says, no. I said, can you see that they needed to not acknowledge you in order for you to develop that skill that you really need now in your life? And he stood there awestruck. The whole room was silent, and then they applauded. He was crying. I started crying, because that was a moment of insight, of inspiration, like you just mentioned earlier. And he got to realize that, that was a critical moment in his life, and he could be grateful for it rather than be resentful about it. Because the resentment and the guilt and the shame that we carry around the mistakes that we've made are worse than the actual mistake. So we need to learn as human beings, as individuals, to evolve past the perceived mistakes or guilts and shames that we have. Because that's one of the things that drags our energy down.
That's so true, and I think one of the mistakes we all make regularly, all the time probably, is to view any kind of progress or moving forward as a risk in some way. Like making a choice, a career choice, or a choice about whether to go ahead with an initiative or a business venture or whatever it might be. I think quite often we're convincing ourselves that the risks are greater than the opportunities. And the danger is we get into this sort of paralysis of not making any decision because it's safer not to make a decision. And then people require coaching around, why am I not fulfilled? Why am I not becoming more of myself? I mean, it seems to me you just got to start and go for it and see what happens, and then readjust as things don't turn out quite as you expected. Would you agree?
It was one of the mistakes I made in my life, because I got involved in I started learning about spirituality and yoga and meditation, all of that. And part of the learning through that discipline or those disciplines is, to kind of sit and wait. So I did a bit too much of that and nothing happened, to the degree to the degree that 3 months I'd missed my house payments, I'd missed cell phone payments. I got to a really difficult stage in my life that I was struggling with money because I was waiting for something to happen instead of just deciding and acting. So you're absolutely correct in that we need to, yes, there's moments that we need to sit and listen to what life has to tell us, because sometimes we're just trying to ride a dead horse, and you've got to get off the horse and find another one. But a lot of times it's just a matter of choosing one thing, acting, and through that action we'll learn what is right for us, what is not, and then we can change direction. Nothing is cast in stone. I think that's a really important lesson and something that I needed to integrate in my mind.
I think it's a huge point. So let's go on and talk a bit more about money, shall we? And as I was sharing with you before the video, it's an issue I've struggled with a little bit in the past in terms of maybe having values conflicts around money and that kind of thing. Is it a worthy goal to try and be rich? Is being rich all there is? Is that all that matters in life? Is there anything wrong with being rich? I'd quite like to be rich. I'm not, but it might be nice. But what do you find when you're coaching people? What are some of the common issues, conflicts, and successes maybe around money?
One of the biggest things is that I had myself, and that I see many people having, is we look on the outside and we perceive other people as having wealth, having riches, having perceived happiness. And we think this is how we're supposed to be, how our life's supposed to be. We're sold through the celebrities, through Hollywood, through the movies, that's the lifestyle, through advertisements.
Yes.
This is the lifestyle we should be working towards. And that's not true, because we each have our own set of values. We each have our own, I call it a code of purpose. And when we pursue our code of purpose, we are most fulfilled, we're happiest, and that's when we have the highest potential to thrive.
Mm-hmm.
But when we look on the outside and we are comparing ourselves according to somebody else's code of purpose, because that's what they're doing and they're thriving, and they might be happy. We might see an actor and what they do is acting, they might really be happy, but many are not, because they're doing it for the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
So one of the biggest problems is looking on the outside and thinking we're supposed to be doing what other people are doing in order to become successful, in order to become wealthy. And that's not what I'll call it our soul, or our the deepest aspect inside of us is called to do. It might be something else.
Yes.
So that's one of the biggest things I find. We're trying to be something we're not. So we've got to come back to identifying and being who we truly are. Yeah. And that's what's going to bring fulfillment. That's what's going to bring happiness. And yeah, the problem is that this issue originates far back when we were younger, when we start observing our parents and thinking, okay, these are the giants of the society. You think of a little 2-year-old observing parents. Okay, I need to be secure. In order for me to be secure, maybe I should copy what they're doing. So we do what they're doing, and then we start to live a life of mimicking other people.
Yes.
And I believe this is something our school systems should begin to introduce, to start to break the patterns and start to allow us to be more free in our thinking and creativity, to find what's true about us.
So that's interesting what you're just talking about there, because that seems to me to raise the question of what you might call standards. You know, what is the benchmark? What is the standard that I'm trying to achieve in life? You know, what are the role models, if you like? Who are the people I'm trying to be like? Because I think that's probably the way we probably unconsciously think. You know, we pick out someone, whether it be a movie star or these days quite often a football player. Sorry for not a football player, but you know, that fact is, you know, they are like the rock stars of today, and quite often, particularly people from maybe poorer cultures and poorer backgrounds, they see that as their potential escape route into a better life, you know. And it's interesting, isn't it, that we pick out these examples and we try to emulate them without really understanding who we are personally ourselves, and that's maybe explains some of the situations where people seem to have it all, and then turns out they really don't have very much at all. We were having a discussion here just the other day about Michael Jackson, and what a sad life that ended up being for someone who appeared to have everything.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And one thing, just to add to that, Paul, there's nothing wrong with looking outside and looking at people and saying, okay, I'd like to be like that, I'd like to reach that level, but not at the cost of your own truth, not at the cost of your own authenticity. So, you know, there's a saying that goes, you know, the shortest path to success is to find somebody else that's done it and copy them and do what they've done. But you got to make sure that that's the path that's true for you to walk on. If it is, then great. Look at the people that are successful in the field that you want to achieve in, and identify what they've done to succeed, and you know, take from that what you need, but not copy them. You understand what I'm saying?
Well, doesn't this come back to our point we were discussing about the energy that you feel? Because it seems to me that when you're on the right path, you feel it, you know it, you're humming, you're crackling with energy.
Yeah.
You go with it? Because it's tough to explain to someone, isn't it, what path they should be on?
It's tough to explain the energy as well.
People often would quite like that answer from a coaching session. You know, just tell me what path I should be on, I'll go and do it. It's not quite that simple, is it? Don't you think you have to kind of feel it?
Yeah. See, so here I'd like to distinguish emotion versus kind of the feeling that we're looking for, because that's a feeling of, you know, you're on the right path, but it's different to an emotion. Some people think that happiness and joy or ecstatic, this ecstatic feeling is the feeling to aim for, but it's not. Now, I've found that it isn't, and I've had experience in my own life that it isn't. When you aim for happiness, you kind of seem to attract sadness at the same time, because they're polar opposites. It's difficult to explain now. I might need some time to build it, but in life, there's polar opposite emotions. And if we look at happiness and sadness, these are polar opposites. But this feeling of being slightly uplifted, of being energized, of being inspired, that's actually a body's response telling us that we're in the right direction. And this is, from what I've seen and experienced, the most accurate indication that we're heading in the right direction. So what we're looking for as a feeling is not to be happy and kind of elated or outside of your body. It's to have a poised, present state and kind of a tear of inspiration. You might feel goosebumps, your body warms up or has that cold feeling, those cold shivers, and you feel, you have goosebumps, your heart opens up, time and space disappears. That's kind of the indication that I look for when I'm thriving, when, that's kind of what I look for. If it's a happy feeling, then it might not be the right indication. So it's just a point of caution to a lot of people, because they think, oh, happiness is the right direction, but it actually isn't.
So tell me, based on your experience, can money make me happy? Is that the answer? What if I get a really great feeling from it?
It's an excellent question, and I think something we'll struggle with. See, I found people that make a lot of money, and it gives a temporary dopamine high. And that gives the perception of happiness, but after the high comes the low. Because then if you're not being fulfilled, then afterwards you need more money and more money and more money to hit the same dopamine high. And some people try to get that from gambling and casinos and all of that. And it doesn't work. Or some people are obsessed about making money in their business at the cost of their health or the cost of their family. So I believe that money isn't going to make people happy. It's not the end game. It's a means. And I like to see money as simply a means of exchange in value. That's when I teach in my trainings, that the first myth I break for people is that money is simply an exchange in value. It's not it's not something to aim for. Obviously, you can have a goal for money. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's not the primary aim. The primary aim is to understand what's going to bring us the most fulfillment and to prioritize our lives towards getting that. For some people, money is a primary aim, but not for everybody. So it is part of this code of purpose that I mentioned. Money might be one component, but it's not for all people.
It's actually quite. I find it fascinating that the richest people in the world, or some of the richest people in the world, are going through a process of now giving away their wealth. And it seems to me that's that search for fulfillment that you've been talking about. Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, people like that, who have finally realised that you can't spend several billion in one lifetime, and so they could choose to achieve them. And hopefully they're achieving fantastic things, but it's interesting, isn't it, that of itself it doesn't seem to be enough for them.
I learned a time ago when I was studying about money and wealth, that in order to achieve great amounts of wealth, we've got to have a purpose for it. A lot of people, they want to have wealth, but for their self-fulfilling needs. Okay, that's cool. So you want to have a couple million, 10 million, a couple 100 million. You want to have a big boat. You want to have the car. You want to have the house. This wonderful lifestyle. Great. But in order to sustain and keep that wealth for generations to come, there's got to be a purpose for that wealth. So I found that people that create a purpose for the money that they're generating, and they want to save and make millions and billions, then if they have a purpose for it, let's say they want to accumulate great wealth so they can create such a level of stability that they start to give to nations that are starving, for example, or they want to find a cure for a particular illness, or they want to use that money for a specific purpose. Then the money starts to become sustainable. But those that don't have a purpose, once the purpose for the money ends, it starts to dissipate. Right. That's almost guaranteed. So people that don't have a purpose for their savings, for their investments, it will at some point dissipate itself. And that comes back to having a purpose for yourself and your life as well. We extend our lives to the degree we have a purpose for it.
Fantastic. Yeah. So that's really interesting for people to think through. I think, what is the role of money in their life? And I quite often feel like it's an enabler. That it enables, having some enables me to do some of the things that I wouldn't otherwise be able to do. And it also enables some choices sometimes, some decisions. It enables choices around how you spend your time, and for people like you and I who have particular interests that we want to pursue, it kind of enables us to do that because we've got some funding to do it, doesn't it? It's like a self-funding charity almost, you know what I mean?
Absolutely. And it's important. One of the things I teach in my program is to prioritize your high priority needs. So if you enjoy travel, let's talk about a person with an average salary, average income. If you enjoy travel, I am a strong proponent of prioritizing a portion of your income to travel. Prioritizing, if you enjoy mountain biking, you prioritize a portion of your income for mountain biking, for your hobbies, for what's going to bring you personal fulfillment, because that starts to value yourself. And you're, I believe, the number one priority in your life. If you don't value and appreciate yourself and prioritize yourself, nobody else is going to do that. So one of the things to prioritize yourself is to plan a portion of money for things that bring you fulfillment. Yes. The second thing is to pay yourself first when you're allocating money. So I strongly believe that people should identify what are the things that gives them highest level of fulfillment and plan for that and put some money aside for that.
And I think you've just put your finger on something really important there, Matteo, about prioritizing ourselves, making ourselves number one. This is, in the culture I was raised in anyway, this is counterintuitive. That sounds a lot like being selfish. And what we should really be doing is helping other people, not thinking about ourselves. But it's the old thing is that I love the metaphor about the oxygen masks on the aeroplane. You've got to put your own oxygen mask on first and then help other people. I mean, it seems to me that unless we are thriving ourselves, how are we going to make any difference in the world or help anybody else? So I'm absolutely with you on this. I think it's so important for people to grasp that you're responsible for your own life and you really deserve to be happy. So do the things that will lead to that and help other people along the way,
Absolutely. It's one of the things that makes me sad is seeing how the world has been constructed up until now. One perspective is there's no mistake that it is the way it is, but it's time to start changing our perceptions around how the world is and how it can be. And one of the things is the belief that we need to put other people first. But a lot of people do that at their own cost. Yeah. And that's not ideal. Yes, help people. Yes, give. There's nothing wrong with giving. Giving is actually a universal principle, and I believe a wealth accelerator, but not at your own cost. You've got to give to yourself first and appreciate and value yourself, and then give to others. So if you're not empowered, you can't give to others.
And this is reaching a nice conclusion to our conversation, really, because everything we've been saying seems to me leads up to the point of when we find our right path, our core of purpose, as you call it, when we find that path that gives us that energy where we feel like, wow, yeah, this is really what I'm meant to be doing. And when we're focusing on ourselves to make sure we're on the right path, then we're enabled to help other people. We're enabled to provide support and help for the benefit of the world, But it's has to start with us, doesn't it? And that's what thriving is, I think. You know, it's asking the question, who am I really, and how can I be more of that? And we touched on it a couple of times. I think the big barrier for people to overcome is this sense that there's an expectation of others that we should follow.
Absolutely, yeah.
We've got to free ourselves of that, I think. Do you agree?
That is one of the biggest things I believe we need to free ourselves from. Is absolutely that expectation of others, or what we think others expect us to do, and truly empower our own lives.
Yes, and in doing that, we can organise resources. We've been talking about money today, but you could talk about time equally, couldn't you? How you allocate your time. And in doing so, we become useful to the world and help others. And I don't want people to get the wrong message here. I do think it's important personally, maybe this is just my value system, but I think it's important personally that we identify how we as an individual can make a contribution, can help other people, but through our own fulfillment and our own path. And it's different for each person.
Yeah, and one of the ways we can help other people is to identify what it is we're great at, and how we can serve other people. Everybody has a place. Everybody has a right to belong. Everybody, we have a unique purpose, just like we have a unique thumbprint, a unique iris scan, a unique facial pattern.
Yes.
Everybody has something unique to contribute, and is part of the collective system.
Yes.
So there's when people find what is true about them and how they can contribute to others, that is one way of giving. And there's no mistake. There's nothing wrong with receiving money in exchange for what you give, because you're contributing a part of yourself, and another person is contributing part of himself. So money is a means of exchange. And when it comes to giving, a lot of people want to give at their own cost, like I said, and they become resentful. That's an indicator that that's not actually giving, that you were actually expecting something in return.
Right.
So the best place to give from is to give anonymously, and to give that you don't expect anything in return, truthfully.
Yes.
And there's great blessings that are available to us when we give from that foundation. But first, we've got to stabilize ourselves. So, yeah.
Perfect summary. Thank you. I think we'll end it there, Matteo. It's been delightful talking to you. I hope we can do it again and continue some of these things, because I found it fascinating. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, there's a lot to talk about.
Yes.
Thank you very much. It's a big topic. Thank you, Paul. I really appreciate the invitation.
We'll speak to you again soon. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.